After a grueling week of hiking through the rugged mountains, all I wanted was a warm shower, a decent meal, and a quiet place to sleep. The Airbnb I booked seemed perfect, affordable, tucked away in a peaceful rural area, and full of charm with its rustic decor and creaky wooden floors. I arrived late in the afternoon. The house looked older than it had in the photos, but it had a welcoming feel. The faint smell of damp wood lingered in the air, but I dismissed it as part of the house's character. After unloading my gear, I made a simple dinner and flopped onto the bed, scrolling mindlessly on my phone. Around 11 p.m., I heard a faint creak above me. At first, I thought it was the house settling. It was old after all, but as I lay there, the creaks turned into faint shuffles. My stomach tightened. It's probably a raccoon, I told myself. Rural houses often had their share of uninvited animal guests, but the idea of an animal in the attic was enough to keep me uneasy. I tried to shake it off and fell into a restless sleep. A loud thud jolted me awake around midnight. My heart pounded as I sat up, listening intently. The sound came again, followed by a deliberate dragging noise. It wasn't an animal. It was too heavy, too intentional. I forced myself out of bed and cautiously stepped into the hallway. That's when I saw it. The attic ladder had been pulled halfway down. My breath caught in my throat. I was certain it had been flush with the ceiling when I arrived. I backed into the bedroom, my mind racing. Was someone up there? Had they been there the whole time? I grabbed my phone, locked the door, and called 911. My voice shook as I whispered to the dispatcher, explaining that I thought someone was in the attic.
"Stay in the room,"
she said calmly.
"Officers are on their way."
As I waited, I strained to hear any sound from the attic. The silence was oppressive, broken only by my ragged breathing. Suddenly, a slow creak echoed from above. The intruder was moving. Minutes felt like hours before I heard the blessed sound of sirens in the distance. The noise from the attic stopped abruptly, followed by a loud thud, as if someone had jumped down. I stayed locked in the room until I heard a firm knock on the door. Police.
"You're safe now."
Shaking, I opened the door to find two officers standing in the hallway. They asked me to wait outside while they searched the house. I stood on the porch, the cold night air stinging my skin as adrenaline coursed through me. When they returned, their faces were grim.
"There's evidence. Someone was living up there."
One officer said.
"Blankets, food wrappers, a flashlight. Looks like they were staying long term. They probably heard us coming and bolted."
The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Someone had been in the house with me, just a few feet above my head. The officers assured me they'd patrol the area, but suggested I find somewhere else to stay for the night. The Airbnb host, mortified, apologized repeatedly and offered a refund. But no amount of money could erase the creeping terror I felt. I packed my bags in record time, glancing nervously at the shadows as I loaded my car, driving away. I couldn't shake the image of a half-open attic ladder or the thought of how long the intruder had been watching me. To this day, I haven't stayed in a house with an attic again, and every creak I hear in the middle of the night takes me back to that quiet rural Airbnb where the walls held secrets I never wanted to uncover. I booked the cabin for peace and quiet, a weekend away from the noise of the city, nestled deep in the woods on the edge of a sleepy mountain town. It was advertised as a county retreat, perfect for disconnecting. The photos showed a snug interior with a stone fireplace and big windows that framed the towering pines. It seemed like a dream. The drive up was uneventful, but as I neared the cabin, the paved road gave way to gravel, and dense trees pressed in from both sides. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the last light of the day had faded. The cabin was smaller than I expected, but charming. A single porch light cast a weak glow, and the woods behind it seemed to stretch endlessly into the night. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of cedar and had a rustic warmth. I settled in quickly, lighting the fireplace and making myself a cup of tea. The first night passed peacefully. I fell asleep to the soft crackle of the fire, the cabin's solitude a balm to my overstimulated mind. But the second night was different. I woke abruptly at 2 a.m., my heart pounding. The cabin was utterly silent, the kind of silence that feels wrong, like the world is holding its breath. I lay still, straining to hear what had startled me. That's when I noticed the window. From the bed, I could see the large living room window, and in its faint reflection, there was a face. My blood ran cold. I thought it might be my imagination, a trick of the moonlight. But then, the face moved. I bolted upright, my eyes fixed on the window. The face was still there, watching me, pale skin, dark eyes, and a blank expression. The man didn't move, didn't blink. He just stared. Panic rooted me in place. My phone was on the bedside table, but I was too scared to move. After what felt like an eternity, the man turned and stepped out of sight. My breath hitched. He was still out there, shaking. I grabbed my phone and tiptoed to the living room, careful to avoid the windows. I checked the locks, front door, back door, windows all secure. My mind raced.
Who was he? What did he want?
Then I heard it, heavy footsteps on the porch. I frowned, my hand gripping the phone like a lifeline. The footsteps stopped in front of the door, and the doorknob rattled, slowly at first, then violently. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my phone as I dialed 911. The operator answered, her voice calm, but mine was anything but.
There's someone outside. He's trying to get in.
I gave her the address in a whisper, terrified he might hear me. She told me to stay on the line and hide, so I crouched behind the couch, my heart thundering in my chest. The rattling stopped, replaced by silence. I held my breath, waiting for the next sound, but it didn't come. Minutes passed. Then a loud thud against the back door made me jump. I peeked out from my hiding spot. Through the dim light, I saw a shadow move past the side window. He was circling the cabin, looking for a way in. The operator stayed on the line, her voice a steady anchor as she assured me help was on the way. But every second felt like an hour. Suddenly, the sound of an approaching car broke through the silence. Red and blue lights lit up the trees. The man ran. I heard him crash through the underbrush, his heavy footsteps fading into the woods. The officers searched the area, but found no sign of him. They did, however, find evidence: muddy footprints beneath the windows and a set of handprints smeared on the glass.
Looks like he was watching you for a while.
One of them said, his tone grim. I packed up that night, abandoning the rest of my stay. As I drove back to the city, the image of that face staring through the window burned in my mind. I haven't been back to the woods since. Even now, in the safety of my apartment, I find myself glancing at the windows after dark, half expecting to see those dark, unblinking eyes staring back. A solo road trip had always been my dream, a chance to disconnect and find some solitude. That's how I ended up booking a cabin in the middle of a secluded forest. It was meant to be a one-night stopover before continuing my journey. The cabin was picturesque, with a large porch and tall windows that framed the trees like a living painting. When I arrived, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. I unloaded my bags, stepped inside, and locked the door behind me. The interior was cozy, with a warm wooden aesthetic and a faint scent of pine. It felt safe, peaceful, even. That feeling didn't last long. As I was making tea, I noticed an old pickup truck parked just beyond the cabin's porch, half hidden among the trees. It wasn't there when I arrived, and I hadn't heard anyone pull in. A chill ran down my spine, but I brushed it off. Maybe it belonged to a neighbor, though the nearest house was miles away. I tried to ignore it and settled into bed, the sound of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl lulling me to sleep. But around midnight, I woke up. At first, I didn't know why. The room was silent, save for the soft rustle of leaves outside. Then I heard its slow, deliberate footsteps on the porch. My heart frenzy. The steps stopped just outside the front door. I held my breath, straining to hear more. No knock, no voice, just the oppressive silence of someone standing there. I wanted to believe it was my imagination, but the weight of the silence told me otherwise. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the footsteps started again, moving away. I let out a shaky breath, thinking the ordeal was over. But then, I heard the back door handle jiggling. I shot out of bed, my hands trembling as I grabbed my phone. The screen glared brightly in the dark room as I dialed 911, whispering my location to the dispatcher. She told me to stay on the line and hide. Clutching my phone and a kitchen knife, I locked myself in the bathroom. My ears were tuned to every sound: the creak of the wooden floor, the faint hum of the fridge, the rustle of leaves outside. Then, the truck's engine roared to life. Through the bathroom window, I saw the headlights illuminate the trees as the truck reversed out of the driveway. It lingered for a moment, idling, as if the driver was deciding whether to leave. Finally, it disappeared into the darkness. The dispatcher stayed with me until the police arrived about 20 minutes later. 2 officers swept the property, while another stayed with me. They found no one, but their search turned up scratch marks on the back door and a greasy handprint smeared on the porch window.
That truck, you're sure it wasn't here when you arrived?
One officer asked, his expression unreadable.
Positive?
I said, my voice shaking. He nodded, his face grim.
You were lucky. If he'd gotten inside.
He didn't finish the sentence. I packed up as soon as the officers left, driving away from that cabin. The woods seemed darker than they had the day before, as if they held secrets I was never meant to uncover. Even now, back home in the safety of my apartment, I can't shake the memory of that night. I'll never forget the sound of those footsteps or the eerie silence that followed. And every time I see an old pickup truck on the road, my stomach tightens, and I wonder if its driver is still out there, waiting for the next cabin in the woods.